Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Monday, April the 14th, 2025. Today is the 113th anniversary of the sinking of the Titanic, or at least the anniversary of it hitting the iceberg. It hit the iceberg, according to the time on the ship's clock, at just before midnight on the 14th. So yeah, it is the 113th anniversary, and this is an iconic event that somehow we haven't forgotten about, and astrologers are of course interested in the sinking of the Titanic and the many charts. You could take the chart of when the hull was laid down, you could take the chart of when it left Southampton on April the 10th on its maiden voyage, when it hit the iceberg, and of course when it finally sank below the surface of the Atlantic. So in this video I want to look at the Titanic. I mean, I know it's a little bit boring, the Titanic, but it is a major event, and it's always good to give current politics a miss. I mean, I've kind of overdosed on tariffs and Trump and Putin and Zelensky, and I thought I'd look at something else, something historic. But before I consider the Titanic, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Monday, April the 14th, 2025. And by the way, if you do happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indeed like it. And if you're not subscribed, I would be, very happy to have you as a subscriber. So let's look at what's happening today. So here is the horoscope for today. Noon on April the 14th, set for New York, and the moon is in Scorpio, 12 degrees Scorpio. So moon is fallen in Scorpio. Moon is exalted in Taurus, therefore that means it is by definition fallen in the sign of Scorpio. Traditionally, there are problems for the moon in Scorpio, though if you have the moon in Scorpio in your horoscope, I'm sure it's fine. There's always a way to deal with it, and it has its advantages. It's a placement that is very emotionally aware, and that might say something about today. There are a lot of planets in water signs. We've got Mars in Cancer, Venus in Pisces, Saturn and Mercury in Pisces, and we've got the moon in Scorpio. Now, every time the moon moves into Scorpio over the last few months, it's been in mutual reception to Mars, because the moon is in Scorpio, which is a sign ruled by Mars, and Mars is in Cancer, which is a sign ruled by the moon. So the moon and Mars have a certain affinity to one another. So the moon being in Scorpio isn't necessarily such a bad thing at the moment with this mutual reception, and it can allow many of us to assert ourselves in a way that is subtle, but is also sort of emotionally aware. And, the next time the moon is in Scorpio, in around a month's time, I'm afraid that moon, it won't be in mutual reception with Mars anymore, because Mars is on the verge of moving into Leo, and it'll be a couple of years before Mars gets into Cancer again. So perhaps it's time to take advantage of that Moon-Mars mutual reception. We can get our way, provided we're subtle. Now, as far as lunar aspects are concerned, there aren't really any lunar aspects of note today. In fact, there aren't any aspects at all today. I mean, at least not any major aspects. So you could say that it's a day when not a great deal is going on. I don't think that's entirely true, but we do have to dig a little deeper to find out what is going on. And perhaps what we should be interested in is a semisextile between the Sun and Venus. So there's the Sun at 24 Aries, 25 Aries, and it is semisextile Venus. So Sun, semisextile Venus. So what does that mean? Now, a semisextile is a minor aspect. It's a 30-degree aspect. And when two planets are in semisextile, they're somehow at odds with one another. Because you've got the Sun in Aries. You think about Sun in Aries, exalted in Aries, loads of stuff that the Sun wants to do. It's assertive, wants to take the initiative. It wants to get on with it. But it's semisextile Venus in Pisces. And when two planets are in semisextile, that means they're going to be in signs which are very different from one another, at least if that semisextile is exact. I mean, you could have a situation where two planets are in semisextile and in the same sign. For example, if the Sun was at 0 degrees 1 minute Aries and Venus was at 29:59 Aries, then they would be in semisextile, but they'd be in the same sign. But normally they are going to be in different signs. So Sun in Aries wants to take the initiative, but Venus in Pisces is seeing things in a rather different way. I mean, Venus in Pisces is quite an emotional placement, likes to feel, likes to be aware of the emotional environment, and that could be about one's feelings getting in the way of action. But we have to somehow bring things together. It allows us to act in a way that is emotionally sensitive, and perhaps we can also take advantage of the fact that the moon is in mutual reception to Mars by exaltation. And tomorrow, Tuesday, we have another semisextile. We have Sun in Aries semisextile Uranus. And in fact, we'll be feeling that Sun semisextile Uranus today. So what that means is that really the Sun is on the Venus-Uranus midpoint, because Venus and Uranus are in sextile to one another, and the Sun is right between those two planets. So the Sun is on the Venus-Uranus midpoint, and that gives us a different feel to the thing. Because if the Sun is on the Venus-Uranus midpoint, that might indicate that there could be exciting events regarding other people. That's one way of looking at it. And we shouldn't assume that people are going to behave in a particular way. And we should be ready for anything. And even with people we know very well, they might do something we really weren't expecting. Though Venus-Uranus isn't just about other people. It can be about art and what looks good, what looks exciting, and could be about fashion, the way we present ourselves. And so Sun on the Venus-Uranus midpoint could be about being original, presenting ourselves in a way that is unusual, that certainly gets everyone's attention. Whether that's a good or a bad thing, rather depends. Now, there are a few things that are about to happen. So notice that Mercury is at 29 Pisces. So Mercury is getting ready to move into Aries, but it's not quite there yet. Mars is at 28, 35 Cancer. So Mars is getting ready to move into Leo, and that happens later in the week. So with Mercury and Mars right at the end of the signs, in both cases, some of us might feel that we're on the brink. We're waiting for something to happen, and because it's not happening yet, we're just not ready to make commitments because we don't really know what's going on. It's still, very unclear, and if we feel that we need to wait it out, that might be the right approach. So another thing, moon at 12 degrees 52 Scorpio, that means that the moon is in the Via Combusta, and the moon is going to move out of the Via Combusta, United States to America time, sometime over the afternoon. So, wherever you are in the Americas, the instability connected with the first 15 degrees of Scorpio will start to dissipate, and it may be easier to get things done, by this evening. Now, if you're not in the Americas, then probably the moon is going to be in a Via Combustor for pretty much all of the day. And so when we're talking about the Via Combustor, particularly the Scorpio side of a Via Combustor, remember the Via Combustor is that part of the sky between 15 Libra and 15 Scorpio. And usually the Scorpio side is more difficult than the Libra side. So don't make assumptions. And things can happen that we really hadn't allowed for. But if we do make an allowance and we accept that things aren't written in stone, that people can be a law unto themselves, we'll be protecting ourselves from instability, and we'll be giving ourselves the flexibility to handle events as they crop up and not be completely knocked off our balance by them. Now that's the picture for New York. So if we recast the chart for Sydney, Australia, remember Sydney is just a representative of Australia and New Zealand. At noon Sydney time, the moon is in Scorpio, sort of 5 degrees Scorpio. It's kind of making a square to Pluto. It's not really making any other aspects, and this is a reminder. But a lot of the planets are in late degrees. Regardless of whether you're in Australia or the Americas, it's just the way it is. You think about it. Venus is at 24 Pisces, Saturn 26 Pisces, Mercury 28 Pisces, Sun 24 Aries, Jupiter 18 Gemini, Mars 28 Cancer. So because there aren't many planets in early degrees, that means that when the moon is at the beginning of Scorpio, it doesn't really make many aspects. And if you are in Australia or New Zealand, perhaps the main aspect is moon square Pluto. And moon square Pluto, it's a fast-moving aspect, but there may be moments of intensity because, it helps. Help, is that the right word? The moon is in Scorpio, so that's a fairly intense placement for the moon anyway. So you put it next to Scorpio, you put it next to Pluto by means of a square, and you can really feel that the atmosphere is powerful, and issues of control might be important, but it's a fast-moving aspect. I wouldn't take that moon square Pluto too seriously, and if you find that you can't express something because it's all a bit too heavy with that moon square Pluto, just be patient. Things will move on. And then there is the heliocentric picture. So if we put the sun at the center of the solar system, and like yesterday, the Earth is still making that opposition to Chiron, or from a geocentric perspective, the Sun is still making a conjunction to Chiron, and I've already said quite a lot about that. But Earth opposition Chiron, I would see that as the struggle to be different. We want to do things differently. We want to stand out. We don't want to do things in the usual way, and a bit of originality can go a long way. And that's probably one way of looking at things heliocentrically. And as far as other things are going on, Mercury and Venus are kind of making a semisextile. So Venus in Scorpio, semisextile Mercury in Sagittarius. Because it's a heliocentric chart, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about the definition of that particular aspect, what it means for them to be in semisextile. It just may be enough to say that Mercury and Venus are making a contact, and Mercury and Venus are a pair that can be very artistic. We want to create something that is a fundamental expression of who we are, and perhaps with that semisextile that's something that we are striving to do. We want to make something, create something that is outstanding, and there may be a way to do it. It won't necessarily be 100% easy, but it can be done. Another aspect I should point out is the fact that the Earth is just separating from a quincunx to Saturn. Okay, it's a couple of degrees off, but if we link that together with the opposition to Chiron, I've said that Earth opposition Chiron is about trying to be different. Earth quincunx Saturn is an awareness of constraints. We're very aware of that. We're wondering whether it is really the right thing to do. Are we going to be able to get away with it? What are people going to say? And that's something we have to struggle against or with. And there is a way. There's always a way to be an individual. And it might be a time where it is quite essential that we are an individual, because we can't just let things pass. If we don't like things, if we feel we have a contribution to make, then we perhaps need to take the risk. So that's the heliocentric picture. Overall, astrologically, not a great deal going on. There are no really precise aspects that really catch my attention. And today it's just Sun semisextile Venus. Okay, if you're in Australia, you've got Moon square Pluto, but that might reflect what's happening today. Just today might feel we're between one thing and another. Some of us might be still recovering from the full moon, and perhaps it's a good thing there aren't many aspects. Perhaps we've got some freedom, and as Mercury gets ready to move into Aries, as Mars gets ready to move into Leo, we've got a bit of time for reflection. But still, we should try to squeeze as much as possible out of the planetary positions and see if we can say anything useful about the 12 signs. And so let's look at the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Monday, April the 14th, 2025. Aries. Aries, just a reminder, the sun is not going to be in your sign for much longer. By the end of a week, the sun will be in Taurus. So take advantage of the Aries season while it lasts. And with the sun in Aries conjunct Chiron. Now that conjunction to Chiron was exact over the weekend, but it's still pretty close. And this is a time, Aries, when you need to be an individual, when you need to do things your way. And your way is the best way. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be disruptive just for the sake of it, or because you're feeling angry about something. That is pointless. Indeed, it's counterproductive. You have to decide, Aries, what is important and what is worth taking a stand about. There are things which I think you probably should take a stand about, things that are important, not just for yourself, but for other people, for society at large. And there are other things that are just trivial, that are just a waste of everyone's time. So do get your priorities right. And also have a sense of your own strengths. And, at the moment, the moon is in Scorpio. So it's quite an intense placement for the moon. And sometimes, Aries, you're not entirely comfortable with the moon being in Scorpio. I mean, Aries and Scorpio may both be ruled by Mars, but they're very, very different expressions of the sign Mars. Mars, as far as Aries is concerned, that's about something very direct, being directly assertive. Scorpio is a different aspect of Mars. It's that more passive aspect of Mars, using its emotional power to get its way. And at the moment, Moon in Scorpio is making a mutual reception to Mars in Cancer. And that mutual reception is something that you can certainly benefit from. It does give you strength, but it's not strength in a direct way. And you have to be patient, and you have to be able to tune into your power. And sometimes the best way of getting your way is to be indirect. You don't have to go for a sort of frontal attack. That's probably not the right approach. It's better to consider your strengths, consider the other person, consider if it's a conflict situation. It may be another person, it may be an organization, it just may be a challenge. Just consider the opposition, whatever the opposition might be. Consider its weaknesses and give it some thought, and be able to tune into your feelings, and in that way you should be able to make things happen. And overall, Aries, you have a very, very strong sense of self, and it shouldn't be too much of a problem if you just keep focused. Keep focused. Are you going to be able to maintain your focus? There is some possibility, Aries, that there may be moments today when you lose your focus. Just moments. You get distracted and you almost flip into another dimension. And that's not a bad thing, depending on what you're doing. If you are engaging in spiritual pursuits, or you're trying to explore things of a cosmic, spiritual, religious nature, that's good. But if you're doing something very focused and it requires concentration, and you allow yourself to get distracted, then flipping into a different dimension may not be very helpful. And concentration is going to be important, and you mustn't indulge in activities which could be distracting. For example, I don't think it's a good day for drinking, or it's never a good day for taking drugs, but particularly now. Of course, it depends where you are. Of course, this is I'm in Washington State, so you can buy marijuana in your local marijuana shop. You can do that, but drugs should be avoided, and alcohol as well. You need to be really very focused, because there are things you need to do, and also with that Sun conjunct Chiron, you want to be different. Not different for the sake of it, but instead you need to be different because you need to get people's attention. You need to get people to think outside the box. And if you're going to do that, you've got to be really with it. If you have any weakness, any loss of concentration, then you could embarrass yourself or worse. So if you are going to be assertive, you've got to be very organized and together about it. And as far as relationships are concerned, I think the Moon-Mars mutual reception does give you emotional sensitivity. And I think that you will have a reasonably good awareness of what other people are experiencing. And if there are silences, then you have an opportunity to understand what those silences are about. So just because someone is saying nothing doesn't mean that you can't understand what they're trying to communicate, or even what they're hiding. I think you can understand that, and that should help relationships and help you understand understand other people, but it does require some subtlety, and that might be part of today's experience, being subtle, but also knowing that you really can make things happen. Taurus. The moon is still in Scorpio. Scorpio is, of course, your opposite sign, and with the moon in Scorpio, it's difficult not to notice other people, or at least not to be aware of how they could, in theory, have an impact on your life. That's true. But just because people can have an impact on your life doesn't mean that they will have an impact on your life. And I think it just might feel that you have to be aware. You have to kind of watch what people are doing. And in a way, it's quite positional. By positional, I mean it's rather like you on a chessboard. You're a piece on a chessboard, and you have to be aware of where the other pieces are relative to you. And provided you know where everything is relative to you, you should be okay. And that means that it's all about prevention and anticipation. So if something is happening which might in the end work to your disadvantage, you can tune into it. You can be aware of the movement. And in all probability, actually, nothing much is going to happen. I think that's actually possible, but you just have to be there. You have to have that awareness. And if you're thinking about relationships in a positive way, then you might see some signs of progress, signs that you and another person perhaps have something to say to each other, can perhaps relate well to each other, but don't assume that too much is going to be happening. I do think that today might actually feel rather slow. And so, don't make assumptions about other people. Don't assume that just because they're present, just because they're there on the chessboard, just because you can see them moving, and just because they're aware of you, it doesn't mean that anything is actually going on. And I mean that in a good or a bad sense. You might regard someone as a threat, but just because you see someone as a threat doesn't mean they're actually going to do anything. Or on a different note, you might see an opportunity with another person. You might see how they can help you. You might see how you and another person can get on with each other. There's all that potential there, but it doesn't mean to say that potential is going to be realized, especially today. And also, Taurus, I think that you are quite capable of seeing things in a different way. You are quite unique at the moment. You're feeling that Venus is sextile Uranus. That Venus-Uranus sextile is not exact, but it's kind of made stronger by the fact that the Sun is making a semisextile to Uranus, and the Sun is semisextile Venus. And that Sun semisextile Venus, it is an important aspect. In fact, you could argue that the Sun semisextile Venus is the aspect that dominates today, even though it is a semisextile, which is supposed to be a minor aspect. And that the Sun semisextile Venus could be quite challenging. You might feel that something is pushing you, is challenging you, and it's not a direct challenge, and it may come from your own unconscious, or it may be that you have an awareness that someone wants you to do something, that they expect you to do something, but it's not being stated explicitly. So, Taurus, it's important that you read between the lines. There may be expectations on you which you need to take into consideration, and you need to show that you're addressing those expectations. Now, that doesn't mean to say you have to do what people want. Instead, you perhaps have to signal that you understand those expectations, and that you are making a decision about whether or not to follow those expectations. It might, under certain circumstances, be a good idea to explain why you don't want to do something. Even if you haven't been asked to do it, you just explain yourself. It won't be so difficult. And if you explain yourself, then it's going to make things a lot easier. And also, as far as other people are concerned, remember that Mars is now getting very late into Cancer, and very, very late. And Mars is on the verge of moving into Leo. Sort of later in the week, it moves into Leo. And that might say something about another person's behavior, or about other people in general. Other people very often they don't actually know what they want. They half know what they want, and they're not very good at explaining things. And you need to accept that. And if things aren't clear, you may find that you do have to read between the lines. But even then, it's going to be difficult to know sometimes what those expectations are, what people are expecting you. They do have expectations, but it's just difficult to exactly define them. Gemini, Moon continues moving through Scorpio, and with the moon moving through Scorpio, you may feel that it's a time when you need to adjust. Things have happened. I mean, not necessarily bad things, but things have been happening, and you haven't always understood what was going on, and it just takes time to work it all out. And with the moon in Scorpio, you need that time and you need that space, and you shouldn't feel that you have to do anything. I don't think there's actually a great deal of pressure here. If there is any pressure, it comes from you. And you might have views on what you should be doing today, what you should be sorting out, what you should be organizing. And of course, if you're in the Americas, it's the 14th, so tomorrow's the 15th, April the 15th. That's the first tax deadline. If you're in the United States, rather not the Americas, if you're in the United States, Tuesday is the tax deadline, April the 15th. I mean, that may be one aspect of how things are working out for you, Gemini, but you might not be in the United States. You probably aren't, all things being equal. But, so there are things to sort out, and you can do it in your own way, and you shouldn't feel that there's any great pressure. And while this is happening, Gemini, I think that your social skills are going to be pretty good. I think you'll know how to behave, and you'll be able to get on with people. And if you make a real effort, Gemini, you can actually be quite enthusiastic and positive, and you can present a new view of the world which people want to hear. And because of that, you might be someone that people like, and so you might be quite popular today, but in an understated way. I mean, it is a day, Gemini, when you're not really courting popularity or attention. You just want to do things, your own way. But if you are in a social situation, I think that you can, in most cases, be pretty effective. And another thing, Gemini, to bear in mind is that Mercury is your ruler, is getting ready to leave Aries. I think it's in a couple of days' time. Mercury moves into Aries, and Mercury is also its conjunct Skeet. A Skeet is a fixed star associated with accidents and disasters, and I am absolutely not saying that there's going to be accidents and disasters, but it's possible, Gemini, that you are aware of the ways in which accidents and disasters can happen. And so that might make you a little bit defensive. You know that if things go wrong, they can go badly wrong. And you might want to do something over the day just to shore something up, to make absolutely sure it's not going to go wrong. And if you can do that, you'd be telling the universe that you are a sensible person that can be trusted. You often think about that with insurance, for example, because insurance, on the face of it, seems to be a waste of money, because when you buy insurance, chances are that nothing bad is going to happen. It's just you're going to be paying this money on insurance, and you're never going to need it until you do need it. And if you never need it, well, you're still telling the universe that you are not taking things for granted. I think the universe probably likes it when you are properly insured, aside from any moral angles about it. And it just shows the kind of person you are. And if you are thinking about all the possibilities, bad possibilities as well as good possibilities, I do think that the cosmos will smile on you. Additionally, aside from Skeet, while Mercury is moving through Pisces, it just may feel that there's something that needs to be finished. When Mercury changes sign, that's a big deal for Gemini, and there's perhaps something that needs to be finished that you're doing well with. Remember, Mercury is conjunct the North Node, and it was very much a part of who you are and what you were put on the planet for, and you're doing well, and you want to make sure that you do a good job. So, don't slack off. But I don't think you will slack off, because I think at the moment, Gemini, you are very conscientious, and you're going to want to make sure that everything is sorted out. And today you've got the freedom to do all of that. Cancer. Cancer, moon is in Scorpio, and the moon is in mutual reception with Mars. Now, as I stated earlier, this mutual reception is not going to be a regular monthly feature anymore. So while Mars was in Cancer, and for the last few months Mars has been in Cancer, every time the moon went into Scorpio, it was in mutual reception to Mars. So although moon in Scorpio has a somewhat difficult reputation because it's fallen in Scorpio, every time the moon was in Scorpio, it was in mutual reception to Mars. So in fact, moon in Scorpio was often, I think, perhaps a good time for you, when you were able to not just be yourself, but you were able to be creative and even a little bit lucky. And so again, we've got moon in Scorpio this time. This is the last time the moon is in mutual reception to Mars, and so Scorpio, it should be a good day. And the moon is in Scorpio tomorrow as well. So maybe, Scorpio, there are things that you need to take advantage of. And, if you don't take advantage of them, well, it's possible that you miss your chance. I mean, I don't think you will absolutely miss your chance. And even when Mars moves into Leo, moon in Scorpio is still pretty good for you, Cancer, simply because moon in Scorpio, it's in a water sign, and so when the moon is in a water sign, you're feeling comfortable, you're feeling you're feeling in your element with Moon in Scorpio, and that's how you feel. And the Moon doesn't really make any aspects in Scorpio. Okay, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then it makes a square to Pluto, but I don't think that's too much to worry about. I think that the overall message of the Moon not making any aspects in Scorpio is actually that you have a lot of freedom. You're not going to be pressurized, and if you want to do something, especially if it's of a creative nature, Cancer, then yeah, you can just go ahead. Don't feel you have to apologize, and I don't think there's going to be any resistance. So whatever you want to do, Cancer, then I would suggest you just go and do it. And I think in the process, if you so wish, you can make a good impression. People are going to regard you as being quite a fun person, and at the same time very definite, and very definite about what you like, what you don't like, what you want to do, and that will be appreciated. And because people are going to like you, it does mean that relationships of all kinds should work. If you want to get on with someone, if you want to make some kind of overture to another person, then I think in many cases, it should work. And there is going to be no restriction. You really can be yourself, and you can perhaps create the day. You don't necessarily need me to make suggestions about how the day might work out. So, what kind of day would you like to have, Cancer? Because I think in many cases, within reason, that is the day you can have. So it may just be a question of just enjoying yourself. Though, don't forget the conjunction between the Sun and Chiron. Now that Sun conjunct Chiron is separating, but it's still pretty close. And the Sun conjunct Chiron is in Aries, and so Aries, cardinal sign, you're a Cancer, you're a cardinal sign, and so that's important to you. And Sun conjunct Chiron might be about you being an individual, and additionally having a clear set of ambitions, which not everyone will appreciate. Some people might be puzzled by some of your ideas and by your behavior, especially in a working environment. So if you are working, or if you're trying to hack out a business path for yourself, you have an unusual way of looking at things, and that is Sun conjunct Chiron, and you shouldn't be afraid of that. Also, Sun conjunct Chiron may be an idea. It might be an idea relating to business, or just an idea about how you're going to approach society, which is different, and it could even be a little bit revolutionary, and mischievous as well. It's not entirely what people want to hear, but it's important, and that you've got something to express, and today's not a popularity contest. I mean, it is the case that you can get on with people, that people are going to like you, but that's not the be-all and end-all of it. The first thing you've got to do is be an individual, and that's something you really can do with that conjunction between the Sun and Chiron. Leo, there is a Sun conjunct Chiron, as I was just saying to Cancer, and this Sun conjunct Chiron has been around for a few days. It was forming over the last week. It is exact, and it does say something about your expression. And even though that Sun conjunct Chiron was exact over the weekend, it's still very close. And so, Leo, in terms of your self-expression, I think that you're going to be very good at communicating who you are and also what you want. And you shouldn't be afraid of being an individual. And isn't that what Leo is all about? Leo is the sign of the individual, and it's about standing out, but ideally in a way that isn't arrogant or boastful. It's just about being yourself and feeling that beating Leo heart, that energy and that power. And so whatever you think, whatever you feel, that way in which you are different, it's something that really can be expressed with Sun conjunct Chiron, and it is in its own way quite unique. And there are other things going on which also highlight your uniqueness. The Sun today is making a semisextile to Venus, and early tomorrow it makes a semisextile to Uranus. So the Sun is on the Venus-Uranus midpoint, and so with the Sun on the Venus-Uranus midpoint, you might have ideas about the way things should be done and the way things should look, and because Venus is involved, Sun on the Venus-Uranus midpoint, that may say something about how you present yourself, what you wear. And so you want to be different, and you want people to recognize that you're different. And once they recognize that you're different, that gives you an opportunity to really show how different you are, going back to that Sun conjunct Chiron, and how you can present yourself as someone who is unique, who is perhaps a bit of a rebel, because we need rebels at the moment, don't we? I mean, we can't just follow things in a normal way. I mean, it's not that kind of time. Everyone is a rebel. Everything is falling apart. So rebels are in need because people are looking for direction. They want to know what's going on. And Leo, you can provide a direction. It is certainly a time for you to be positive and for you to be trying to help other people understand what's going on. Do you understand what's going on? I think you can understand what's going on. And, it's all about using your leonine intuition, making the connections that other people can't make, but you can make it. And do take advantage also of the fact that Sun is still in Aries. Sun is your ruler in Aries, and that does make you strong, and you get people's attention, and additionally, you're in touch with what's going on, and it's back to making connections. You know what's going on deep down. You might not like what's going on, but you do know what's happening, and because you know what's happening, that does give you a certain advantage. Virgo, I don't think that there's a great deal of pressure today. When I was looking at the broad astrological picture, regardless of the 12 signs, just a broad astrological picture, I did point out that really there's not a lot happening. There aren't that many aspects. I think I really said that the main aspect was this minor aspect, minor semisextile, Sun semisextile Venus, and so what would you like to do? That might be one approach. The Moon is in Scorpio. It's not really making any aspects, except perhaps a square to Pluto if you're in Australia or New Zealand. But with the Moon moving through Scorpio, I think that Virgo, you have an opportunity to move around go from place to place, talk to different people. You can be fairly experimental, and you're going to be helped by the fact that you're going to be quite sensitive at the moment. And so, your sensitivity will make sure that you don't get yourself into trouble, and you'll know who you're dealing with, and you'll understand how far you can go. And so that does give you a certain amount of choice. Now, as we're talking about Virgo, well, we have to talk about your ruler. Of course, your ruler is Mercury, and Mercury is right at the end of Pisces, and it's getting ready to move into Aries, and that might be how you feel. You feel that a change is afoot, and when you've got a change coming up, you may feel that you can't really do much because you're waiting for something to happen. And so if you're waiting for something to happen, then it seems to be absolutely reasonable to hold back. And additionally, Mercury is conjunct Skeet. Skeet is a fixed star, which I talk about every now and then. It is a rather difficult fixed star, as I always say, connected with accidents and disasters, particularly connected with things connected, with shipwrecks, accidents at sea. So the usual warnings about water and not taking risks, and additionally, accidents and disasters, that is an exaggeration maybe, but things could go wrong in the social sphere, and maybe it's because you say the wrong thing, or perhaps you have a misunderstanding. You make an assumption about another person, and because of that assumption, you act in a certain way, or you say something you shouldn't. And, once you've done it, it's difficult to put it back. And so, with Mercury getting ready to change signs, you don't want to mess things up right at the end, just before Mercury goes into Aries. So, probably, Virgo, if in doubt, don't do it. If in doubt, don't say it. If you find yourself reaching conclusions today, and you're ready to act on those conclusions, then do consider the possibility that those conclusions are wrong, or that you simply don't have enough information. And that may be particularly applicable to other people and how you're dealing with people in a one-to-one sense. You can't make assumptions. And when Mercury moves into Aries, in some ways things are going to be easier, because Mercury won't be in Pisces anymore. Mercury is in its fall and its detriment in Pisces, so it's not a great place for Mercury. And so that's perhaps something you should be preparing for, this changeover. So if you're in a state of preparation, what do you have to do? Well, maybe you have to do nothing, and you just have to have an open mind, sit it out. Yeah, you are communicative, and in most cases, your ability to communicate is going to be fine. But it's important that you don't communicate on the basis of knowledge of your. Let me be clear about this. If you just go with the flow, you try to relate to people in a very easy way, things are going to be fine because you are quite sensitive. But if you have strong feelings and you find yourself reaching conclusions about another person, and you start acting on those conclusions or saying things on the basis of those conclusions, then things might go wrong. So, keep it easy and keep it non-committal, and today should be fine. Libra, you're probably still coming to grips or getting to grips with the full moon. So we had that full moon over the weekend, and with that full moon, I would have hoped that you've reached some conclusions, and perhaps you're in the process of making decisions, but based on the fact that you can now see the truth. The truth is available to you. Now, it's possible you might not want to accept the truth, but it has been revealed, and this truth is particularly clear when it comes to certain other people in your life. That full moon over the weekend, was taking place across the main axis of your chart, and so that could have said something about relationships, and you perhaps started to understand what those relationships were really about. And so today there may be a feeling of sort of contemplation, as the moon, moves out of Libra, and of course it's now in Scorpio. And additionally, Libra, we do have another aspect. We have a semisextile between the Sun and Venus, and it is exact. And so we got the Sun in Aries, making a semisextile to Venus in Pisces, and that aspect could be quite challenging. I mean, you feel that you want to take it easy. You don't really want to make any commitments, and there is a lot to contemplate. But that Sun making a semisextile to Venus may represent pressure. It could be that another person is pressurizing you, or is almost challenging you to do something, and you don't really want to do it. And with a Sun semisextile Venus, it's not like a hard aspect. It's not like a semi-square or a conjunction. I mean, a conjunction could be seen as a hard aspect, and that is perhaps a matter of controversy. But Sun semisextile Venus, it's a time when you do have to really consider what the pressure is about and whether the pressure is reasonable, because you can't just do things in your own way all the time, and you do have to take into account outside influences. I mean, you can ignore these influences; they're still going to have an impact on you. And so, ask yourself, what that challenge actually is, and this is especially the case if you're dealing with powerful, assertive people, or it may not be people, it just may be events calling on you to do something, and you're aware of this pressure, but you don't want to do it, and you kind of know you have to do it as well. So the semisextile Venus does need to be negotiated, and I think it's going to be important that you're honest with yourself. And what you perhaps need to do is find a way of making it clear who you really are. And that might be a question that some people have. What do you really believe in? What do you actually want? Because some people might not know, and if you don't tell them, can you expect them to guess? And if you do show your true self, not in its entirety, but you just show how you are different, and you make it clear that you do have views, I do think that will be appreciate it, and don't be afraid to cause some waves. Venus is still making a sextile to Uranus, and that Venus sextile Uranus is about you doing things differently and being original. And if you can be original, and if you can be honest about your originality, I think in the long run you're going to be making it a lot easier for yourself. Scorpio, moon is still in your sign, and the moon is making a mutual reception to Mars, and do take advantage of it. This moon-Mars mutual reception, does take place when every time the moon has been in Scorpio over the last few months. Now, Mars, your ruler, is getting ready to leave Cancer. So the next time moon is in Scorpio, in a month's time, it will not be in mutual reception to Mars, because Mars will be in a different sign. So, with this moon mutual reception, moon in moon, of course, moon being in Scorpio, a sign ruled by Mars being in Cancer, a sign ruled by the moon. Yeah, you are. You are someone at the moment who is able to make things happen, and your emotions are strong, and you can use your emotions. So you have emotional power, and it's a power that is not about taking a direct initiative. That's absolutely not something you have to do. You can work behind the scenes, and it will be quite clear that you are in control. And also, Scorpio, ask yourself, what is important to you. There are things that matter. There are things that you actually can do very well. So it's important that you are able to really appreciate that, and it's not a time to be fitting in. Absolutely not. You have your own way of doing things, and that is the way it should be done. And additionally, don't underestimate your impact on other people. If you want people to do things, then in many cases they just will do it. They won't have a choice. Now, that does give you a certain amount of responsibility. There is a possibility, Scorpio, that you might misuse your power, and you might see that other people are in a weaker position than you, and you might see this as an opportunity to get something, or to get some power, and you could do that. But I don't think that's the right thing to do. I think you have to have that responsibility, and do appreciate other people's weaknesses, because people, or at least certain people, aren't feeling great. Venus is still making a conjunction to Saturn. Venus may be direct, and so people are feeling some of the important people in your life may be feeling a little bit better, a little bit more decisive, but it's still pretty slow. And I think in most cases, you're going to be holding the cards, and if there's any competitive situation, I think chances are you're going to come out the winner. But do you want to come out the winner? Is it the right thing to be the winner, to get the better of someone? Not always. And you do have to think about the future. What happens now is one thing, but if your gain is another person's loss, then at a later stage you might have to deal with the consequences of that. So do respect your own power, Scorpio. That is important, and also just try to look after yourself first. Look after your own interests. Make sure that you do as much as possible to strengthen yourself. As a solo exercise, not strengthening yourself vis-a-vis another person, but just making sure that you are feeling strong and confident and well organized and ready to deal with the future. And things are about to change. Mars is now in the last couple of degrees of Cancer, getting ready to move into Leo. What happens when Mars moves into Leo? Mars moving into Leo, as far as I'm concerned, is an event which is fortunate on many levels. And Mars, of course, moves out of Cancer, a sign where it's fallen, and so when it moves into Leo, it's going to be your time. It's going to be a time when you really can proceed quickly and decisively. So that is something to be looking forward to, and perhaps now you should be in a state of preparation, but you will be preparing from, I believe, a position of strength. Sagittarius. Sagittarius, it's a new week, it's Monday. Does it feel like a new week? Are you ready to go? Possibly not. I think this week might actually have a slow start, and you shouldn't feel any great pressure today, even tomorrow. The moon is moving through Scorpio today, and moon is not doing a great deal in Scorpio. It's not making any aspects of note, and so perhaps Sagittarius, you should be relieved. You perhaps thought there were things you would have to do today, but I don't think that's necessarily the case. So, if you want to do things your own way, without having to worry too much about external pressure, then go ahead, and or rather do the opposite of going ahead. Just enjoy yourself, and perhaps you can create your own destiny today. I mean, you don't always have to feel that you have to worry about what the planets are doing, what the moon is doing. It just may be a day when you do have more freedom than usual. And if you were to try to be active and to make an impression, it might not work out. I mean, you might make some impression, but I don't think your heart is going to be in it. And perhaps you should wait until the moon moves into Sagittarius. Moon is now in Scorpio. The moon is not really going to be in Sagittarius probably till Wednesdays. So Wednesday, is that right? I mean, not fully. I mean, it won't be until Wednesday, but it's really truly right there in Sagittarius. So that is a good reason just to not feel obliged. Now, that doesn't entirely mean you should do absolutely nothing. At the moment, there are things you can do in your own way, at your own pace, which may actually be very useful. And they don't need any advertisement. They don't need any help. You don't have to tell people what you're doing. And so, what is it? What really should you be concentrating on? And perhaps it's something that you felt in the past you just didn't have time to do it. And now you have got time. You have got a day or two where you can get good at something and find out how something can be made to work in the real world. Another point to make is that Mercury is getting ready to leave Pisces, and This is an important sign change coming up, Mercury moving from Pisces into Aries. And, when Mercury moves into Aries, I think in general, you are going to be more confident and more extroverted, and it's going to be easier for you to express yourself. But also, while Mercury is in very late Pisces, it may say something about other people, some of the people that are important to you, some of the people you have to spend time with. And Mercury in that last degree of Pisces, it's quite close to Skeet, which is this fixed star, which has a very unfortunate reputation. And I don't want to exaggerate that misfortune, but it may indicate people who've got something on their mind, people who've got something to worry about, and they're perhaps keeping it to themselves. And you need to try your hardest to be sensitive, to be aware of what might be bothering other people. Now, just because you're aware that something is bothering someone doesn't necessarily mean you have to do anything. Because, when Mercury moves out of Pisces and into Aries over the next couple of days, then you might actually start to see a change in certain people. They may become more positive, more optimistic, and more responsive. So pay close attention to the important people in your life, and just consider the possibility that they are in a process of transition. Capricorn, the moon continues moving through Scorpio. It's not doing a great deal in Scorpio, but with the moon in Scorpio, I think that your ability to get on with everyone should be pretty good. It's not that you're going to be particularly pushy or you're going to feel wonderfully extroverted. You're just going to be yourself, and when you are yourself, you will be appreciated, and people will like having you around. And so don't be shy, and because you can make people's Monday better just by being around. That's true, and you're going to have a certain ability to make connections. It's always this question about how do you make connections with people? How do you get them to talk? How do you get them to know who you are? And today you're just going to know, and that might be connected with the fact that the moon is in Scorpio. The moon is in mutual reception to Mars, and of course, moon in Scorpio is a water sign. It's quite emotional, and of course, Mars is in Cancer, and Cancer is your opposite sign. So, with the moon making a mutual reception to Mars in Cancer, then I think that you'll know how to focus your energies in order to get people to respond to you. But you won't make a big deal about it, and you're not going to be putting any great pressure on anyone. And I think that will be very much appreciated. And aside from that, Venus is still making a conjunction to Saturn. In fact, Venus is applying to a conjunction of Saturn. So Venus has been doing all sorts of things. Venus has been retrograde for a fair amount of time. It made a conjunction to Saturn a few days ago. Then it came to a standstill, and now it's starting to make a conjunction to Saturn again. So Venus is slowly moving back towards Saturn. And so with that Venus-Saturn conjunction, I do think that really does emphasize your ability to be sociable and to get on with people. And this is not just about today. It is probably about the whole month, or certainly until Venus moves out of Pisces. I mean, Venus moves into Aries. When does Venus move into Aries? Venus doesn't move into Aries until the end of the month, the very end of the month. So for the rest of the month, Capricorn, your ability to get on with people is really going to be very, very good. And you'll just know how to behave. And, from a relationship perspective, new people may be coming into your life. New people, I think, have been trying to come into your life for some time with this Venus conjunct Saturn. I don't know what that's about. I'm not saying it's necessarily about romance. It could be about friendship. It could be about a business partnership, whatever it is. But, you are not alone. And I do think you need to recognize that. And if you have felt alone and you felt that people aren't available, then maybe you need to make more of an effort. Because I think if you do make an effort in a social and interpersonal way, then I think you could see rapid dividends. Aquarius, new week, it's Monday. I think that you are fairly focused. I think there are things that you want, and this kind of started at the end of the weekend as the moon moved into Scorpio. So with the moon moving into Scorpio, you know that there are things that you want, and you kind of feel that there is a little bit of a hurry. You feel that you haven't got all the time in the world, and you have to do what is necessary. So that should be your approach. Now, don't assume that everything is going to happen straight away. So today, Monday, could, at least on the surface, feel quite disappointing. There just won't be any results. You put in the effort and it doesn't seem that anything is happening. But it's just Monday. You have to start somewhere. So you put in the effort and you may not see anything today, and it may not be until tomorrow, when the moon starts making aspects to Venus and Saturn, for example, that you start getting rewarded for what you're doing. So don't just give up on something because you're not getting any response, and you certainly shouldn't be looking for instant gratification. And another thing about today, or not just about today, but the last part of April, is that Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn. Venus has been making a conjunction for some time, and Saturn is a slow-moving planet. Of course, Saturn is your ruler. So Saturn's a slow-moving planet. Venus, at the moment, is a slow-moving planet because it's just gone stationary direct. And so Venus is close to Saturn, and Venus is the natural ruler of relationships. So one way of looking at Venus conjunct Saturn might be that you are attracting people, that people want to know you, and it's important that you don't put them off. Well, okay, you might not want to have certain people around you, and maybe there are certain people you do have to discourage. But if you need help, or you're looking for friendship, you're looking for relationships, if you have ambitions in that kind of direction, then the last part of April really does look quite good. So, do be open to new possibilities. Also, that Venus conjunct Saturn may say something about money. Saturn has been in Pisces since the beginning of 2023. I think March 2023, Saturn went into Pisces, and it's been there solidly. Of course, it's now starting to get ready for its movement into Aries, but it is still in Pisces. Venus is making a conjunction to Saturn, and Pisces is a sign in the Aquarian chart that is often connected with money. And so with Venus making the conjunction to Saturn between now and the end of the month, this could be a time where, from a financial point of view, you can make good progress. And so if you're trying to accomplish something with money, whether you're trying to secure some money, make more money, if appropriate, get a pay rise, there's something you can do. And it may have something to do with your people skills and with your charisma and your persuasiveness. And so if you're feeling at the moment that you're being denied money, then there might be something you can do about it. And it's possible that your charm will go a long way. So I know that's not just about today, but do think about the last half of April, and the last half of April in general, Aquarius, actually looks pretty good. And so as it's a new week, get ready to start taking advantage of your natural skills and your social skills. It's not just about being nice to people. You can actually get something for your efforts. Pisces, the moon continues moving through Scorpio, and Scorpio is a water sign. Pisces is a water sign, so with the moon moving through Scorpio, you should be feeling relatively okay. Your sensitivity is on good form. You have a pretty good understanding about what is happening around you. And also the moon is making a conjunction to true black moon Lilith, and this conjunction between true black moon Lilith could be working on several levels. Now, if you see true black moon Lilith as an energy that is quite dark, but is also quite universal, then that true black moon Lilith conjunction might give you some understanding of what is happening in this world. And it's not your darkness, it's the darkness around us, and we can see it. You just have to turn on the news or go to the website of your favorite news source, whether it's mainstream media or something alternative. You can see it, you can feel it, and it kind of makes sense. But the true black moon Lilith, may also, Pisces, be a chance to tune into your own past. And there are things in the past that you might not always want to be in touch with, but they also represent the future, and they represent a possibility. So don't be afraid of true black moon Lilith and what true black moon Lilith represents. True black moon Lilith is a force that can be difficult and might seem to be a little bit twisted, but perhaps it's only twisted because it's being hidden. And when it's out in the light, when you're actually looking at what it is, you realize it's all about you and your potential. And it could be quite spiritual and liberating, that moon conjunct true black moon Lilith. And so that's you could say, that's one of the main aspects today. And additionally, we have a semisextile between the Sun and Venus. So Venus is moving through your sign. It's just gone stationary direct, and Venus will be moving through Pisces, even though it's late Pisces at the moment. It's 24, 25 Pisces. It will be moving through Pisces for the rest of the month. And so Venus in Pisces is about you and how you are presenting yourself. And at some level with Venus in Pisces, you just like things to be straightforward, and you want things to be emotionally flowing, and you're perhaps trying to avoid complications, especially when it comes to dealing with other people. But then with that semisextile to the Sun, it is a challenge because it's a Sun in Aries. The Sun is exalted in Aries, and it may be that you are being forced to look after your own interests in a way that you don't actually want to do. You'd rather not, because it's simpler not to. It's just exhausting having to chase things which they belong to you. You should be given something, but you just can't be bothered. But the Sun in Aries is saying there are things that maybe are being denied to you at the moment. They belong to you, and you need to claim them. And so with that Sun semisextile Venus, ask yourself what they are, and try to be grounded and down to earth and realistic about it. And if you're honest, there may be things you need. You might not need them now, but you might need them in the future. And as this is the case, you need to then work out what you need to do to assert yourself. And if you want to be assertive, you can be assertive. And that's perhaps the message of that Sun semisextile Venus. And you can be assertive, but you can also be very charming at the same time. And in fact, you can use your charms to get your way. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And it's now time to look at today from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 13, which is with others. I mean, with others, Greg Wincott translates it as with others. The Wilhelm translation is fellowship with men. I just thought with others was more general, and there weren't connotations of gender with it. So with others seemed more appropriate. And so, with others, it indicates that today other people do matter. And there is this question about whether or not you should spend a lot of time socializing with people. Or perhaps you're thinking you need other people in order to get your way. You can't do things on your own. Or you might just feel lonely. And so if you're feeling lonely, well, of course, it would make sense to reach out and meet people or talk to them on the phone, whatever you have to do. But there are two moving lines, and the bottom line moves, and the second from the bottom moves. And, with the bottom line moving, that indicates slow progress. There are people around. At the moment, no one has an agenda. And people are individuals. People are not forming factions. That can always be the problem with socializing, can't it? Are you in the in-group or the out-group? And, it's very easy to see things in terms of friends and enemies, and there can be rivalries. But at the beginning, there seems to be healthy but undramatic contact with other people. Then the second line moves, and the second line is a problem line, and the second line is about the risk of factions. As soon as people start interacting with each other, then they start separating from each other. Groups start to form, and the overall situation is really not very healthy. And so what this is kind of indicating is that there's pressure to be with other people. You want to be with other people. You might want to meet up with other people, but when we're dealing with groups, this is not really about one-to-one relationships. I think it's more about associations, contacts. If you're involved in any activity where there is rivalry, where there are factions, I think that would be, especially the case, for example, if you were working or you're in a competitive environment where everyone is looking for something and everything is about, how can I benefit from this situation? Well, it's not good. And so in that case, probably excessive socializing should be avoided because it might not have good consequences. And because we've got these two moving lines, that means we move to a second hexagram, and the second hexagram we move to is hexagram 44, which is coming to meet. Now, that might sound good, coming to meeting someone, but the I Ching does not regard that as being fortunate. It's meeting someone on the basis of someone else being in control. Yeah, someone is very keen to get to know you. They're very keen to get your confidence, but chances are this person is not to be trusted. Even if they are to be trusted, it might not work out well. And, the advice here is that you have really got to try to be independent. Independence does matter, even though you really want to be with other people. You don't want to be alone. You want to feel you're part of something. But if you what do they say? If you give someone an inch, they'll take a mile. People will take advantage. That's almost inevitable. So try to hold firm and rely on your own resources. And because you what you don't want to do is put yourself in a position of dependence, and that really could happen. So that's the warning for today. It's not necessarily going to be super dramatic, but all things being equal today, I would suggest other people should be avoided. And I want to finish this video by looking at the Titanic. And I know that people talk about the Titanic sort of ad nauseam, and the subject might be boring, and it was 113 years ago, so why do we talk about it again? Well, from my perspective, I didn't want to talk about politics today. I didn't want to talk about tariffs. I didn't want to talk about Donald Trump. I didn't want to talk about Zelensky. I just wanted a break from that. So, why not talk about the Titanic? And, when you're looking at the Titanic, this kind of chart, what you're asking is there a signature here which is unambiguous? A clear signature that disaster was going to happen? And that's always the question you should ask yourself with any of these charts. And that's one reason why I'm rather wary of looking at too many points. That's why I'm wary of looking at asteroids, for example, because if you look at asteroids, in the end, you might reach a situation where you can always find what you're looking for. And that seems to be dangerous, and that can almost in a way take away the magic from astrology. It has to be clear. Now, I'm not saying with the Titanic charts that it is necessarily clear. It might seem clear. There might be particular things you notice in the Titanic charts that look really obvious, but that might be done through hindsight, and we always have to be careful with astrology. So turning to the Titanic charts, well, there are lots of charts you can look at. You can look at the chart for when the hull of the Titanic was laid down. You could look at the chart of when it was launched, sea trials. You could just go on. So I'm I'm going to restrict myself to 2 charts, well, 3 charts. I want to look at the chart of the start of the maiden voyage of the Titanic. I want to look at the chart for when it hit the iceberg. I also want to look at the chart of the captain of the captain of the Titanic. I think his name was Edward Smith, and because he was in charge, so his chart, even though we don't have a time of birth, must at least. I mean, there were some times of birth suggested, but I don't think we have a safe time of birth for Edward Smith. So let's start off with the maiden voyage. So this is when, on April the 10th, 1912, when it left Southampton, and so it hit the iceberg about 4 days later. And this is always a question. It's certainly a question I get. People ask, is this a good time to take a flight? Is this a good time to, go on a trip? When does a trip start? Well, there are different times. If you take a flight, is it when you go through customs? I mean, I think the flight is. I would regard that as when you take off. I don't fly very often. I haven't. The last time I've been in a plane was beginning of 2019. So I haven't flown for over 6 years, nearly 6 years, or something like that. So it's a rare event for me flying. But as far as I'm concerned, that moment when the plane takes off, it always seems to be quite magical when that plane takes off, and that's the moment. And likewise, if you're, at least I think it's a moment, when the plane leaves the ground. And likewise with the Titanic, it would be, when the ship set sail, and I think it was at noon on April the 10th, 1912. Set for Southampton. So here's a chart for its setting sail, and the sun was in Aries on the midheaven. That's a very dynamic beginning. Sun is assertive. It's conjunct the North Node. It's going places, and on the surface, that certainly looks good. But there are a few problems. The sun is making a sextile square to Neptune. So sun is less than a degree from making that square to Neptune in Cancer. And you might say that sun square Neptune describes the hitting the iceberg perfectly. Sun in Aries, ship in a hurry, midheaven, cruising through the sea, cruising across the Atlantic, and then Neptune in the 12th house, the hidden obstacle, the thing that sinks the ship. So Sun square Neptune seems to fit very well, and of course it's also Neptune square the nodes, and nodes can be about contact and not just about karma and destiny, but it shows that there's something very Neptunian about this voyage and the start of this voyage. And additionally, we have got the moon. Now the moon is really interesting because the moon is void of course. It's right at the end. Why didn't they wait until the moon went into Aquarius? Of course, they wouldn't have been thinking about this astrologically. But one way of looking at the moon is void of course in a boat. Well, it's not going anywhere, is it? Because it's void. And generally speaking, one doesn't really look beyond the sign change. With traditional astrology, you could say, well, the moon's made its aspect, it's void, but the next aspect the moon makes is a conjunction to Uranus, and so the conjunction to Uranus is It is. That's an accident. That's a disaster. And that Moon-Uranus conjunction takes place just over in about 3 degrees. So the accident happened for, well, what was it, around 4.5 days after it set sail. So it's not 3 degrees, but I think that the Moon moving to a conjunction of Uranus is symbolically telling us that there could be an accident at this time. And Uranus is also relevant because Uranus, there is a quincunx between Mars and Uranus, applying quincunx. Mars in Cancer making a quincunx to Uranus in Aquarius. And additionally, the midheaven is conjunct the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So that Mars-Uranus quincunx would affect everyone across the world. But what makes it special to the Titanic is the fact that the midheaven, that fast-moving point, the highest place on the ecliptic, was on, relative to the horizon of Southampton, was on the Mars-Uranus midpoint. So you could say midheaven on the Mars-Uranus midpoint does indicate that the ship is heading for disaster. So I'm sure there are lots of other things to notice about this chart. You might notice that Venus is fairly close to Skeet. Now that really is a signature of accidents and disasters and shipwrecks. So that's Venus moving to Skeet. So that's something that one might want to be aware of. And then there is a point that it hits the iceberg. So here's the chart for the actual hitting the iceberg, and it says April the 15th, and that is because it's London time, GMT. Of course, as far as the boat's time, it was April the 14th. That's why today, April the 14th, 2025, is the 113th anniversary. And so I think it happened at 2:38. I've taken the coordinates of the exact place where it sank. And Astro.com has this chart, so I checked that with Astro.com to make sure I had the right time. So here's a chart. By the always doing astrology for things happening in the middle of the ocean is always a pain, and because you have to manually put in the coordinates. But anyway, that's a chart for when it hit the iceberg, and very briefly, well, true Black Moon Lilith. 1317 Capricorn. So true Black Moon Lilith was square the midheaven when that happened. I mean, that's, for some reason, that's one of the first things I noticed, and I know one shouldn't necessarily focus too much on true Black Moon Lilith. I'm pretty new to true Black Moon Lilith. For a long time I didn't really take it too seriously, but kind of doing these videos has sort of encouraged me to keep looking at it. It always sort of helps to sort of click the Black Moon Lilith option so I can see it in the charts. And actually, one thing I do notice about this chart, one of the first things I noticed, in fact probably the first thing I noticed about this chart, is that Jupiter's rising. Jupiter in Sagittarius rising. I mean, okay, it's maybe 5 degrees from the ascendant, but certainly if you use whole sign cusps, whole sign houses, Jupiter's in Sagittarius is in the first house, Plastus it's in the 12th house. And then you look at you look at other stuff going on in the chart, and you notice that Pluto is sort of rising as well, and you kind of see a symmetry between Jupiter and Pluto. And so that Jupiter and Pluto, the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, will be squaring the ascendant. And will be squaring the ascendant. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because the Jupiter Moon midpoint will be squaring the ascendant. So think about what Jupiter Pluto means. The Jupiter Pluto pairing. The Jupiter Pluto pairing is about really being desperate to be successful. Let's get ahead. Let's make things happen. We've got to do what we can. Jupiter and Pluto contacts, they are not complacent. There is actually a Jupiter-Pluto sesquiquadrate in a few days' time, and I'll be talking about that. But so Jupiter and Pluto is a principle of really pushing it, and it could be about the speed of the boat. I mean, that might be it. Let's get there on time. We've got this wonderful vessel. Let's see what it can do. And if we set up the 90-degree dial for the sinking, then we might get some more information about the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. And so if we look at the ascendant, so there is where's the ascendant gone? Ascendant has disappeared. No, the ascendant is there. So there's the ascendant, and there's the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So the ascendant is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So that's telling us about the boat, its course. It's really, 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 really going for it. But Hades is aspecting the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. And Hades is also aspecting the Saturn-Neptune midpoint. So Saturn-Neptune as a pairing could be, from a psychological level, I think it's about fear. But Saturn is... But the iceberg is kind of quite Saturn-Neptune, really, isn't it? It's an obstacle, but it's very Neptunian. And not being aware of an obstacle and the fear of the sea. And so with the ascendant aspecting Hades on the, Hades as a planet of death, on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, really pushing it as hard as you can, and then on the Saturn-Neptune midpoint, that to my mind says something about the accident, or rather the hitting of the iceberg. And when you're looking at these events, it's always good to look at the midheaven. So turning to the midheaven. The midheaven is on the Mars-Neptune midpoint, and it's on the Mars node midpoint. So remember, when we looked at the maiden voyage of the Titanic, Neptune was square the midheaven. Neptune was square the midheaven Neptune was square the midheaven, and Neptune was square the midheaven, and it was square the sun, and it was square the nodes. So Neptune was making a lot of aspects. That was when it set sail from Southampton. But Neptune was still square the north node, and so there's your Neptune north node on a 90-degree dial, shown as a conjunction between Neptune and North Node, and then it hits Mars. And so Mars is the violent event. And also, remember, Black Moon Lilith is tied up with this, because Black Moon Lilith, this chart doesn't show Black Moon Lilith, but Black Moon Lilith was squaring the midheaven. So you had Black Moon Lilith on the Mars-Neptune midpoint. And in the night, it might have been a clear night, but... disaster happens. So, those are a few thoughts about the two charts from the Titanic, looking at it from a midpoint viewpoint. And finally, I wanted to look at the captain of the Titanic, Edward Smith. So here is Edward Smith's chart, and don't have a time of birth for Edward Smith. He was born on January 25th, same date as Vladimir Zelensky, by the way. I don't know how relevant that is. Of course, Vladimir Zelensky was born a lot later. What was it, 1970? In the late 1970s. But he's got Sun at 5 Aquarius, like Vladimir Zelensky. And so, what about his chart? He has Saturn in Aries. Saturn in Aries can sometimes be problematic, but a whole generation of people will have a Saturn in Aries, so that isn't necessarily anything to be too concerned about. He has Mars square Jupiter. So Mars square Jupiter can be about pushing things too far. Mars square Jupiter can be difficult because you put a lot of energy into something, and you sometimes don't know when to stop. And looking at what happened to the Titanic, it could be that Mars square Jupiter was kind of indicating what eventually did happen, although a lot of people have Mars square Jupiter and nothing particularly bad happens to them. Now, the Sun is on the he's got Sun on the Mars Jupiter midpoint. So if we look at the midpoints for Edward Smith, again it's always a bit difficult when we don't have a time of birth, but here is his chart. We put Sun on the Sun on the dial. So there's Sun, and there is where's Mars gone? There's Mars and Jupiter. So you can very much see that he's got Sun on the Mars Jupiter midpoint. So from a positive point of view, you could say, well, Sun on the Mars Jupiter midpoint is a larger than life person, someone who is potentially popular. He's got Sun, by the way, making a hard aspect to Cupido. So Cupido is a hypothetical planet connected with relationships, unions, someone who is popular. And apparently he was popular. Apparently people would actually deliberately choose to travel on boats where he was captain. And I think he was sort of regarded as, the millionaire's captain. So the rich people like to have him captaining a ship they're on. So maybe he was able to really benefit from Sun conjunct Cupido. And but the Sun on the Mars Jupiter midpoint really does indicate that something a little bit excessive about him. And additionally, he had Sun hitting his his Hades Admetos midpoint. Now the Hades Admetos midpoint these are two hypothetical planets both connected with death. Admetos is about delayed death. It can be postponing something. And with Admetos, you can see, all the drama over, not drama, but the situation with the Titanic after it had hit the iceberg. There was just those hours where it was just, was it 2 or 3 hours when it was slowly sinking, and so that might be Sun on the Hades Admetos midpoint. So that is, is a possible way of looking at it. And then there is the solar arc directions that Edward Smith had. So these are these are his directions. So again, he was around 62 at the time of the sinking. and the direction that stands out is Neptune. I think it's Neptune. No, the Sun. So the Sun. There's his directed Sun. Okay, his directed Sun is at 7 degrees 41 Aries, and his directed Neptune is at, yeah, there it is, 5. There's his directed Neptune is at 5 degrees 52 Taurus. So we don't have an exact time of birth for him. So approximately his direct solar arc directed Neptune was square his Sun. And I think that the Sun is really important in his chart because it's on the Mars-Jupiter midpoint. And so, Neptune square his Sun seemed to roughly link up with the sinking of the Titanic. One could also use a micro aspect here. And so his solar arc directed Sun was in Aries. Well, you could say that by the time he was 62, if you look at the sign positions of directed planets, particularly the directed Sun in Aries, that's very much who he was, the captain, taking the Titanic across the Atlantic, perhaps as fast as possible, Sun in Aries, and it runs into trouble. And his solar arc directed Sun was exactly 15 degrees from his natal Uranus. Now, you could say, well, so what, 15 degrees? Well, 15 degrees is an important aspect because, 15 degrees it's a semi-sextile. So a sextile is 60 degrees, a semi-sextile is 30 degrees, and semi-sextile is 15 degrees, and that is going to be 1/24 of the circle. So it's a micro aspect, yes, but given the symbolism, Sun and Uranus, I would have said that actually fitted quite well. So, those are a few thoughts about the Titanic. It's probably nothing you don't know already, and other people have looked at the Titanic chart and they've probably done a better job than I have, and I've sort of rather focused on midpoints. But, I thought, as it was the 113th anniversary, it was a good opportunity to mention the sinking and to look at its astrology. So, thank you very much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.